Greetings, everybody. Happy to have you join us in the webinar on getting started with Global Gap. My name is Hans Mensa, and I am the program manager for market intelligence for the grain spills and oilseed sector at CBI. For those who are here for the first time, CBI is one of the executive agency of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation. CBI was established in 1971, and we have over 55 years of experience of contributing to local sustainable economic development through exports. And we work with SMEs in over 70 countries, mainly focused in Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So before we start this webinar, I'd like to tell you more about CBI for a bit. And we currently have some technical issues with our slides and internet. So we have rearranged some setting things. So I'll say let's start with a bit introduction of CBI, and we can continue, and hopefully our presentation slides will be working. Yeah, so we work with different actors across the supply chain. CBI aims to support SMEs strengthening their sustainability to export. We also provide practical solutions that aim at tackling bottleneck issues in the supply chain. And we also provide knowledge such as our market intelligence, which I'm part of, and I will be telling more about. My slides seems to be jumping. Let's see if this will work. Yeah, so we work in 14 different sectors, of which grain spills oilseeds is one of them. Most of them are agricultural sectors, and we have service provider sectors such as IT outsourcing and tourism. Yes. So as I mentioned, we work in mostly in Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Southeast Asia, and a bit part of the Middle East. We currently have grains and oilseeds projects in Kenya, Uganda, and Guinea. In Guinea, it's fonio, and Uganda is oilseeds, and Kenya is women empowerment in different grain spills and oilseed sectors. So in our projects, we try to define economic opportunities for local SMEs and help them to export their products to the international market, mainly on the European Union. So we focus on sustainable production and export as a means to create decent jobs. We work on long-term sector development. Mostly our projects takes about 4 to 5 years, and we provide practical insights with technical expertise that we have through training, coaching, and market entry activities. So we have two main missions, and the first one is we provide training and coaches led by market experts and export coach on the ground. So as I mentioned, in our projects, we focus on decent jobs. We pay attention to women and youth employment. And the second one, what we do is also we provide market information with the market intelligence, which you can find on our website. And every year we try to provide about 300 market studies on how to enter the European market. We provide tips on how to find European buyers and what are the buyer requirements for exporting products to the European market. And I think we have solved our technical issue. Warner is going to be our moderator for this webinar. Is everything good on your side, Warner?
Ja, ik heb nu alles wel goed staan.
Hans vraagt hoe het gaat. Hans vraagt of het goed gaat.
Ja, het gaat goed. Ik ga naar de juiste slide toe.
Warner, I started a bit telling about CBI and what we do. So I think I have 1 minute left to wrap up, and then I can give you back the floor. Is that okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Hans.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so the second part is that we provide market information, which I was talking about. We publish around 300 market studies every year on our website, and these studies consist of. Am I still sharing my screen? Oh yes, okay, perfect. So they consist of market information and tips for exporting your products to the European market. We provide for the fact sheets of all setting products, also country fact sheets. And we provide this information all free of charge and can be easily accessible on our website, cbi.eu. You just type it on Google, market information. This will lead you to our website, and you see that on my screen. That being said, I'd like to hand over to Warner, if you're ready.
No, I have problem sharing from here.
Could you maybe send the slides to me so that I can
Yeah,
share?
I did already.
Okay. Oh, it's working now, right? Could you move to the next slide to see if it's working? Or do I have the rights to change? Yes, perfect. Seems to be working now. Are you still there, Warner? Okay. Now let's just move on to our first speaker, who's going to talk about introduction to GLOBAL.A.P and the certification framework. That will be done by Georgia Cholaki. May I ask you, Georgia, to start?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I will present you the GLOBAL.A.P Farm Assurance Solutions, the solutions that AGRAYA company under the GLOBAL.A.P brand offers for grains, pulses, and oilseeds. For those who are not very familiar with GLOBAL.A.P and what we call GLOBAL.A.P Farm Assurance, it's the umbrella of solutions that we offer not only for agriculture but also for aquaculture and floriculture. I know that these are sectors that are out of the scope of this webinar today. The goal of these solutions that we offer the last more than 20 years now is to ensure safe, responsible, and sustainable production. We operate through a system with certification bodies, third-party certification system, accredited certification bodies, and in collaboration with experts from different sectors, we develop solutions to support producers in the primary production. Can you please proceed in the slides? To further support our producers, we have built a capacity building program to support producers achieve certification against our solutions and to achieve the international sustainability goals. Globally, we have more or less nowadays more than 200,000 producers that hold a certificate, are certified for their production processes. And the global solutions nowadays are respected globally among the retailers. Can you please proceed to the next slide? Thank you. Our solutions apply, no, to the previous slide, please. Thank you. Our solutions apply to a great number of plant and aquatic species, more than 700 species, and this number may change, soon because we constantly add new species In our certification scope, all audits of the farms are conducted against the Global.Ga.P standard and the Global.Ga.P general regulations. The certification bodies use the respective checklists to audit the farms, and the audits take place, as I already said, by third parties accredited, approved by accreditation by the certification bodies, and we ensure transparency during the certification process to the retailer, to the market, using the Global.Ga.P IT platform by displaying the status of producers and their farms in our Global.Ga.P IT platform. Of course, always respecting the legislation for data sharing. Audits are performed at farm level, okay? And even if the audit leads, okay, the slides, it's a bit confusing because the slides are running a bit. Let's discuss about the Global.Ga.P journey, how you can start your Global.Ga.P journey. As we have different solutions for grains, for pulses, the producers are welcome, the farmers are welcome to select the correct solution, the solution that suits them more, looking for the proper information about our standards and solutions in our Global.Ga.P website. Can you please proceed? Producers can prepare for their audit by conducting an internal check using the standard documents, the requirements for the solution, for the standard they choose, before an external audit by the certification body that they will choose to register takes place. So the producers prepare using the documents that we have free available in our website, conduct their internal check, select their certification body, the certification body that is closer to their area, that is approved for the solution that the producer selects, and they register with the certification body in order to get this external third-party accredited CB audit. If everything is fine, if the producer is compliant with the requirements of our solution, of our standard, the producers get the certificate, and this is visible in our IT platform so that the supply chain is aware that this producer, this farm holds a certificate for this solution. Can you please proceed to discuss what are the solutions that Global.Ga.P, thank you, what are the solutions that Global.Ga.P offers? We have the IFA standard for combinable crops. In Global.Ga.P, we refer to combinable crops for production processes that produce grains, pulses, fodder for cooked or processed consumption by humans or animals, or for use in the industry. There are, of course, other names to use for these crops, like arable crops or bulk crops or broader acre crops, but in our Global.Ga.P standards solutions, we refer to combinable crops, and this is the term that I will use today in my presentation. Global.Ga.P certification production processes for combinable crops nowadays covers more than 190,000 hectares annually. Can you please proceed to explain better what IFA combinable crops covers? IFA combinable crops require audits by certification bodies on the farms annually. So third-party accredited certification bodies, every producer select the certification body that they want, and then the CB conducts the on-site farm audit. And if the audit is successful and the producer is compliant, the certification body issues a certificate that is valid for 1 year, 12 months. What does it mean if the producer is compliant? How does it work? the producers shall be compliant with the framework of the GLOBAL.A.P certification system, that is the GLOBAL.A.P general regulations, and with the requirements that you will see in our website in the document center of the standards, that are the principles and the criteria. The principles are is the fundamental outcome that we want producers to achieve, and the criteria is the guidance, is the method that we give to the producers in order to achieve compliance. Can you please proceed? What this solution, IFA for combinable crops, include? It includes requirements about food defense, about food fraud, about conservation, hygiene in the farm, mass balance, recall and withdrawal procedures, about the history of the farm and the site management procedures, traceability and segregation, because we need to ensure that products that come from certified production processes are not mixed with products from non-certified processes. We also include environmental requirements for waste and pollution management, and we also include requirements for the sustainability of the workers and the health and safety of workers that are working in the farm. Can you please proceed to the next slide? Thank you. Here is just a screenshot, a short summary of the topics, the chapters that we include in our standard for IFA for combinable crops, in details, the topics that we include. And you see here that we have about the production process in more details, also requirements about the plant propagation material that producers use in the farm, requirements for genetically modified organisms, requirements about the water management, the soil management, how producers manage to protect their plants in an integrated farm management. Can you please proceed to the next slide? Can you please proceed? Maybe you wonder what is the benefit? Why producers need to spend resources, time, money to proceed with their certification against IFA for combinable crops. Number one benefit for producers is that they get recognition for safe and for safe farm management and for protecting the environmental resources. As I already mentioned, GLOBAL.A.P solutions are globally recognized by the retailers, by the market, and IFA, a certificate against IFA for combinable crops, is the evidence to demonstrate that the producer implement responsible farming techniques in the farm. Of course, it is a tool to improve the farm management and operational efficiency in the farms. It also reduce the risks for food safety and protect the reputation of their farm. Can you please proceed to the next slide? The next solution I would like to, can you please proceed? I would like to present you that is a GLOBAL.A.P solution for combinable crop certification is the CFP. This is the abbreviation of crops for processing. If you can proceed to the next slide. Crops for processing is a solution, again, implemented at farm level. Here the difference is that we have non-accredited standard, even though the audits take place by accredited certification bodies. And this is for producers that harvest their products, but the products are supplied to the chain only for processing. For example, for milling to produce feed. It is addressed, here we address farm-specific level risks, and some of the risk controls are taken over by the processors, the next step in the supply chain. This is the difference compared to IFA. In IFA, the farmer manages all the risks, but here some of the risks are transferred to the mitigation of the risks are transferred to the processors to the next level, because the products here in crops for processing solution are always processed after harvest. Again, here we have this holistic approach. We include requirements for food safety, for traceability, for the environment, for the workers working in the farm. Can you please proceed to the next slide to describe how it works and how it is different? Here we have an audit every 3 years by the certification body. And maybe you wonder what happens in year 2 and in year 1 and in year 20 and year 3. In year 1 we have the CB audit, we get the certificate has again 12 months validity, but what happens next in the next year? In the interim years, year 2 and year 3, producers conduct a self-control, a self-check, and they share the information of this self-check with the certification body. So there are certain obligations that producers still need to comply with this. The producers still need to comply with the standard requirements, and still they must have in year 2 and year 3 a contract with the processor, the next step in the supply chain after they harvest their grains and pulses, in order to ensure that the risks for food safety are mitigated by the processor. The structure of CFP standard about the requirements, the compliance criteria as we call them, are similar to IFA. We have different categories of requirements. Some of them are recommendations, some of them are minor requirements, and some of them are major requirements. Can you please proceed to the next slide so that we show what are the topics that we have in CFP? We also have similar topics here, as you can understand, with IFA, like the site history and the management, like the record keeping that is mandatory, and the internal check, the self-assessment, as we say. You see here that we have workers' health and safety topics that we manage, and we include requirements, soil management, water management, waste management, traceability, segregation, mass balance, fertilizer and plant protection product application. So maybe you wonder if you can please proceed to the next slide. Can you please proceed to the next slide? Maybe you wonder what are the differences. The main difference between the two solutions that GLOBAL.A.P offers for producers producing combinable crops, as we call them, grain, pulses, whatever, fodder, is that IFA is a solution for products coming from production processes that at the end will not necessarily be processed after the harvest. But CFP, the crops for processing solution, is only for crops that will never be consumed as fresh, and they are always processed after harvest. So maybe some of you think that maybe this is the most suitable, the solution that suits more to combinable crops. IFA and CFP offer a certificate with 12 months validity, annual validity, but the difference is that in IFA, the certification bodies, the external third-party audit takes place annually. In CFP, the external CB audit takes place once every 3 years. And in the interim years, the producers conduct their self-check, their self-control, and inform accordingly the certification body. The last very important difference between IFA and CFP is that the processor in IFA is outside of the standard of the certification scope. In CFP, the processor exists and shall have a contract with the producer, and the processor takes over certain responsibilities in regards to mitigate the food safety risks during the processing steps. So, if you can proceed to the last slide I have, thank you. These are the solutions that we offer. Maybe after this presentation, this very short presentation, you understand that certification is something more, something bigger than compliance. It is the production techniques at the end that the farmers implement in their farm in order to ensure a better future, sustainable future, and safer food for the consumers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Georgia. Very interesting to hear you talk about the Global GAP certification system. Meanwhile, I was thinking about the audience, if they have certification or not. So let us just do a short poll to see whether how far they are in the certification journey. Can you start the poll, please? So basically here we see the certification options within Global GAP. Of course, there are other alternatives as well, not in these answers. IFA is the basic certification option, but there are also other Global GAP solutions, of course. There's an in progress option as well. Most of the attendees until now, they are interested but not yet have a Global GAP certification. Is there anyone in the room that has already certification? Still 0. So let's wait another 30 seconds to see if somebody has experience in the certification field. Now we have at least one. Okay, 10 more seconds to vote. Okay, we can close the poll. Yeah, well, obviously, you came to this webinar out of interest for the Global GAP solutions offered by AGRAYA. So yeah, fully understood. And hopefully this is the start of a new and successful journey, certification journey. Over to the next topic. And that is Christy. She will walk us through the primary farm assurance. Yeah, think of it as a on-ramp rather than jumping straight onto the highway. So it's a very nice new add-on in the Global GAP family of certifications. Over to Christy.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to briefly just, a little bit of a teaser of one of our entry-level solutions. So I'm going to talk today about primary farm assurance, or what we call PFA. Now, this program has actually been around for quite some time. It is a capacity building program. So it's pretty much been designed for those producers that don't immediately, they are not able to immediately go into the certification system. We saw now that there's not really people that's already on the certification, level. from the poll. And so yeah, so that's why we decided as well, you know, around 2014 already, we decided that we need something to help smaller scale producers or emerging producers. Emerging producers can also be those producers that are new to certification. They don't have to be a small scale farmer or a, it's in a region maybe that's new to certification. So we want to help them. We want to make sure that they get the building blocks ready. So that is how the program was pretty much born. We also realized that it shall be something that is a little bit more cost effective than certification. So why is it more cost effective? It's more cost effective because you don't have to implement everything at once. We many times hear that it is quite an expensive process, and we realize that. But now there's a period whereby producers can go step by step and implement the needs. I just want to make it clear that at the moment, this program, PFA, is only available in the fruit and vegetable scope. But there's always potential to also, we have had some demands from different regions also to expand it to combinable crops. It's not there as yet, but it's something that we can definitely move towards too. Then it's also cost effective because, as I said, it's spread over a couple of months or years or however they want to do the implementation. So it's not the huge cost at once. And also in terms of the assessment itself, it is shorter compared to the full IFA assessment. So in that sense, it should be more cost effective than what IFA is at the moment. The purpose of this is when you are going for this program, you cannot export with it. It is designed in a way that it's pretty much for local and regional implementation. And how is it designed? We took certain elements starting at a very low level, and at every level we introduce a little bit more requirements. I'll show that in the next slide. But it's being built on our IFA, Integrated Farm Assurance Standard, the one that you know as the GLOBAL.A.P standard, but on the Smart edition. And then another thing, because we know that many times in certain regions, there is no certification body or bodies that can pretty much do the assessments. So we have then opened the door, what we call for verification bodies. Verification bodies cannot do certification audits. They pretty much can do assessments. They have to be approved with us. So, but not as the higher level of a certification body. But we opened the door for them. So because we know that when the markets are when they grow, when they become bigger, then the certification bodies pretty much only move in. So this could be like a consultative assessment, because verification bodies can do that. Certification bodies, they go according to the accreditation rules. It's much more fixed. So verification bodies at the moment we are being utilized quite a bit for the PFA program. One thing that I also just want to mention and make clear that this is a good way to actually start the process, but it's always good to consult also with the markets in that region, whether they will accept it or not. Sometimes you do get some of these buyers that say, no, we want IFA. So it's always important to make sure what does the buyer or the end user, in the sense that will do the buying, the retailer, the processor, distributor, or even if they supply to restaurants, will they accept the program? Just to avoid that you go through the process and maybe it's not accepted because they want something else. So this is pretty much what the program is about. Now, here is the entry level, intermediate level, advanced level. So this is pretty much the producer or producer groups can then start at the lowest level. The lowest level is a little bit less documentation orientated. They are only as recommendations. It's more like what is happening concretely. You know, is there a pesticide store? Is there a fertilizers, and how are that handled? So it's more the hands-on that we try to have at the entry level. And then when the producer is ready, moving on to the intermediate level, which now contains a little bit more elements, you know, a little bit more minors, a little bit more majors, and then going over to the advanced level, which is the highest level of PFA. Then the documentation becomes a little bit more prominent, but not nearly at the GLOBAL.A.P certification level as yet. So, so this is the process to go through it. This is assessment level, and then it is a capacity building program. So obviously, first prize is to get to certification level. But you can, when there's, you know, when you talk to the buyer, asking if they accept the program, it's also quite important to know some of them feel the entry level might be too low. Some of them say you have to start on the advanced level. So consult with the buyer in the end to make sure that you start at the right level, or at least know that you have to get to intermediate level before they will look at your product. And one of the golden rules in this program is, because it is a capacity building program, the idea is not once you get to an advanced level that you can go back to lower levels, because that defies the whole purpose. Same if that producer or producer group have been on a GLOBAL.A.P certification level, they cannot go backwards, because they was able to get to certification level. They can continue with that. So it's never to go backwards in terms of this program. So yeah, IFA is the where to PFA can go. It's not always needed. The end goal doesn't have to be always IFA, because it can be applied at local markets. And you can actually then keep it as maybe a local standard, you know, maybe the advanced level or maybe the intermediate level could also be accepted, and it is not always necessary to go to IFA, although, you know, it's a capacity building program, so it's you know, something that is achievable. We call it a primary solution, and IFA is a core solution. We base PFA on SMART, IFA SMART, while IFA is more, you know, we have the two editions, the SMART and the GFS. With this program, every producer does receive a number for traceability purposes, and that is registered in our system. So in the case of PFA, it's PFA number, PFAN, and with IFA, it is a GLOBAL.A.P number, or GGN. I already mentioned the 3 levels that we have in the PFA program. So basically progressing through the different levels, while with IFA, there's only 1 level. Okay. Then we allow VBs, and I saw there's some questions there, but VBs is pretty much allowed, while with IFA, it's only certification bodies. Certification bodies can also do that. It's not, but then they obviously handle it as an assessment, and it can even be a consultative assessment. IFA gets a certificate, PFA gets a letter of conformance as proof that the producer or producer group, that legal entity, did reach the level that they should have, and that they are compliant against that. PFA focus on local markets, and it's a capacity building program. It's not suitable for the export market, while in the case of IFA, that is meant for the export market. Benchmarking is not possible against PFA. However, benchmarking obviously for a certification standard like IFA is possible. And then one big thing that you will see, Georgia mentioned the concept of principle and criteria. So that's pretty much the checklist. So you have a principle and criteria concept in IFA. In terms of the PFA, there's principle and guidance. So the nice thing about it, it opens up the door slightly, because it means that elements of this standard can be, you know, implemented at the time that the producer wants to. So at least he needs to meet the basis of the principle, and and we give guidance for them on what to consider to be able to reach that level. So that's really in a nutshell. You will be able to find, you will be able to find a little bit more information on our website. Please go and have a look there. Unfortunately, there's not enough time. When I start to talk about PFA, I can talk for hours. But please have a look on our website. There is contact details if you also want to have, a little bit more information. And we look forward to hear from you. Now, I understand there are some questions. Let me see if I can see that. Okay, so how do you assign verification bodies? That's one of the questions. So pretty much we have an approval process. So if you also go to our website, you will find information about verification bodies. They have to meet certain requirements to become that. So obviously we check qualifications, CV, trainings that need to be done. We have a PFA training that we offer that can be done also with our learning department. And then obviously once that's been done, and there are fees to be paid in terms of it, and some letters needed, so everything is there. But yeah, the basic message is we need to approve them, and then we list them on the website, and then producers or producer groups that want to go for that can find all the information similar to the certification bodies. They find the information, they contact them. We can never say only this company can do that. They have the option to choose, and obviously looking at the pricing, so there's various options for them. But yeah, it's a formal approval process with us. And you can find already on our website. I'll see that I can possibly find the links quickly and see if I can share it in the chat for you, where you can find more information. But there are various countries. We have a couple in Africa. We have, for South Africa, is quite a big market. We have some located in Zimbabwe that I know. I know that there's also in Namibia. We have a couple. Kenya and Tanzania not, but I can double check in terms of that. But Africa is quite a big market, and then South America. And we also have in Portugal that we've got some verification bodies that are there. Yeah, so it is more the developing countries, but even a country like the US for emerging producers also have a PFA program that they are implementing. So it's pretty much, but I'll let me see if I can send the link. If I don't manage now, I'll make sure that I send it to the organizers, and then you can have a look there. Local markets can be regional markets too. Export means export overseas. Yes, yeah. So regional markets, like for example, East Africa, that at this point we see that as a regional market as well. So that is possible, you know, to say, and even like South Africa. So Namibia buys a lot of product from South Africa, so they accept the PFA program. So that could be regional. And when I say export, obviously when you export to the US, to the EU, to those markets and buyers that specifically require IFA certification. So that could even be to the Middle East if because there's already countries that are accepting that. Okay, and then are these organizations governmental or private sector companies? They can be both. We don't, you know, Namibia have a governmental organization, and I know about a lot of countries that use private sector. So for us, it is really that there's no conflict of interest, but also then that they are, you know, that they comply to the requirements that we set up there. Okay. I hope I have answered all the questions. Those are the ones that I could see. So thank you so much, but let me find those links. If I don't find it now, I will definitely share that as well with the organizers, but otherwise my details are also there. Feel free to reach out at any time, and thank you again for listening.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, for the clarification on PFA. Really interesting. The next stop is not at certification so much, but more on the impact side. And then we go to Finn. Finn will explain the impact-driven approach, which is, well, short IDA, and that is adding another layer of impact beyond compliance. So let's see what that is.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Warner. Good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. Christy, you are moving the slides, right? Okay, could we move to the first slide of this chapter? Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, because for the impact-driven approach, IDA, we actually have two different solutions. We have on the left side here of the slides, it can be seen there is the IDA standalone module, which currently is only applicable to the floriculture and plant propagation material sector. However, this is something we are happy to open up also to combinable crops when the demand is there. So this standalone module, it covers some general parts of IFA, for example, like integrated pest management, post-harvest harvest treatments. So these were like fundamental compliance criteria that we had the feeling they also should be included in a primary assurance. And that's why this standalone module can be acquired regardless of IFA certification. On the right side, we can then see the EDA add-on, which is audited additionally to IFA. So there is no repetition of the IFA content. So these compliance criteria that I mentioned before is not in this add-on. This is purely about digitalizing the data, and how that works we are going to look at in the next slides. So Christy, you can move the slide, please. Yes, thank you so much. So IDA is all about measuring resource consumption in data and evaluating the impact. So in order to collect the data, the producer will need to have one of our 7 approved farm management software providers, where the producer is then entering the resource consumption data. This data is being transferred to our IT systems via an API. In these IT systems, we then aggregate the data and anonymize it in order to create reports. Those reports are then being sent back to the farm management software, where the producers are able to view them and yeah, create value from their own data. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think this is like a dynamic slide, so you can click once exactly. So here are the metrics that we are actually recording in IDA. So we want the producers to share their consumption of nutrients, so the kilogram of commercial plant protection product is being entered by hectare and month. And usually the commercial name of the PPP is in the front end of the farm management software. And via the API, then only the active ingredients are shared with us. So this increases the comparability, because oftentimes certain plant protection products are sold under different names or in different concentrations in different countries. And that's why we are here only looking at the active ingredients of those PPPs. Further, we are requiring the producers to report on their nutrient consumption. So the kilograms of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, again, per hectare per month, shall be shared. Additionally, the amount of water that is abstracted from each water source per month, the amount of water used in irrigation and fertigation at the farm per month, and the records of precipitation. And we are looking at these metrics here to kind of calculate the water potential. So if 100 liters on the farm, like let's say 100 liters of water were used on the farm on a certain day, and out of these 100 liters were abstracted from groundwater, then this is basically 0% water potential. But if from these 100 liters, 50 liters were used basically from recovered rainwater, for instance, then this is already much more valuable for the environment. And that's why we also want to create awareness for that. So when basically the precipitation has been recovered, a lot of groundwater can be saved. Lastly, we are also requiring the producers to share data on energy consumption. This is not exclusively for electricity, but also, for example, for gas, for heating the greenhouses, but also for diesel, for running the machinery, the tractors, and so on. Next slide, please. So the steps towards the IDA certification for the producers is first they choose farm management software from our list of IDA service providers. Then they register the metrics that I presented to you previously. For the IDA add-on, we need 3 complete consecutive months of data. And for the module, we require 6 complete consecutive months. And then the CB audit can be conducted. So basically this data that has been shared with us will be then evaluated by an auditor. So they look at the plausibility. If you have 10 hectares of land and you say you only used 1 kilogram of nitrogen throughout the year, the auditor will definitely have a lot of questions, how you manage to then grow crops with this low nutrient use. And yeah, usually or generally these metrics that we require to be digitally shared are also metrics that need to be documented for IFA. So it can also decrease the audit time when a lot of the documentation doesn't need to be recovered from files in like document paper documents. So when the auditor asks you how much fertilizer did you apply in this month, the producer will not need to go to the cabinet, look for the right folder, find the right document to present it to the auditor, but they can actually then with a few clicks just show their records digitally. You can move on to the next slide now. That's it from my side. Thank you for your attention. And in case of any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or to contact me directly. My email address can be found on the slides.
Thank you, Finn.
Thank you very much
for your introduction on IDA. Well, before we continue to Ian's contribution, we would like to launch a quick poll to see the interest among you, the audience, in capacity building initiatives, if they are available in your country. So can you launch the poll, please? Would you be interested in joining a capacity building initiative if available in your country? 5 options. I see already some very quick contributions. They are all definitely, well, without a doubt. Some others need some more time to reflect on this question. So let's see how much the interest is already risen among you. Yeah, some people only mention that it's only interesting if it is linked to real certification. Okay. Some are still have their doubts, not sure. Okay. Still, the lion's share is definitely is convinced. 21. We have 20 more seconds, so hurry, please. No worries, by the way, about the presentation will be disseminated after the webinar. The video recording will be also published on YouTube. That's a side note. Okay, we can end the poll. We see a clear yes. So that's interesting. It gives us a good indication of the interest in future support activities, which can be used by the NGOs and donor organizations also attending this webinar. So next up is at Ian. Ian, can you tell us more about the Global Gap capacity building projects across Africa? Because you're the one who knows more. Am I right?
Yeah, happy to. Very happy to. Hi there. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Walter, for the introductions. As you just heard, my name is Ian Lucy, and I am the Partnerships Project Developer at GLOBAL.A.P, responsible for our organization's capacity building initiatives. And if we can just go to the first slide. Perfect, thank you. So very interesting to see the poll that just came up right now. Very, very interesting, very positive to see the interest in capacity building work and capacity building endeavors. And partnership projects are one of the main vehicles that GLOBAL.A.P has to engage in meaningful and substantive capacity building. So in a nutshell, partnership projects are projects that GLOBAL.A.P is engaged in, working with predominantly development sector partners, so international development agencies such as Deutsche Gesellschaft für international Zusammenarbeit here in Germany, or the World Bank, the IFC, various bodies of the United Nations, organizations like this. And we also work very closely with government as well, with ministries of agriculture, ministries of climate, ministries of export and trade, as well as also some private sector organizations. And in some instances, a combination of all of these different partners together in one project. And the core focus of GLOBAL.A.P partnership projects is on creating an enabling environment in target countries to help support farmers in achieving GLOBAL.A.P certification. And this is done predominantly through training in the GLOBAL.A.P standards. For example, training in the Integrated Farm Assurance Standard that you heard mentioned earlier by Georgia, or for training in the Primary Farm Assurance Standard that you heard spoken about by Christy. We look to train, it varies from project to project, obviously, but speaking generally, we look to train local experts in the target countries, agricultural experts, government extension workers, local consultants, it can vary, but we look to work with and train local experts that already have some agronomic expertise to enable them to be able to work with farmers pursuing certification. And that takes place on varying different scales. So we may, for example, as I'll discuss in a moment, as we are currently doing in Ghana, we might be working with farmers who are right on the cusp of certification, who already have markets for export identified, in some cases already have direct retailers identified. They just need that last step to help prepare for the audit. And then in other cases, we might work with farmers, predominantly obviously in these cases smallholders, work with farmers who are at a far more foundational level and who are just taking the first steps towards certification, maybe simply as part of a process to improve wider food security or on-farm processes, or perhaps to prepare them simply for national exports to local national retailers rather than international markets. As we'll discuss in a moment, we have been doing in Namibia. Christy mentioned earlier, Namibia is one of the sort of most successful case studies we've had for PFA. And so we provide training and all of these different standards. Oh, sorry, if we can just stay on the previous slide, just 2 more minutes. So we provide training in these different standards to help prepare farmers for whichever audit it is that they are going for. As well as the training, adjacent to that, but still very important, and again, depending on the scale of the project, we're also engaged in a lot of awareness raising and certification facilitation. So we will conduct outreach potentially to farmers or to governments or to local retailers, to local producer groups and farmer organizations to help them better understand not only the role of Global GAP certification, but certification more broadly. Try to help them maybe understand the nature and the demands of the export market if we're able to support them with this. And we do this through events, webinars such as this, study tours or scoping missions where we may visit the target countries. And then we also work directly with government to provide institutional and political support to support the uptake of certification. I already mentioned, for example, training government employees and extension workers to enable them to work directly with farmers in the field. We might support governments in the development of local standards that may be benchmarked against the Global GAP standard, or maybe simply aligned with our standard to help support people in taking those steps of certification. We may help with certain technical questions that governments may have with regards to how the Global GAP standard can be adapted to fit the context of their specific countries through developing what we call national interpretation guidelines. So there's a whole host of work that we do through our partnership projects, and like I say, it can vary in scale and vary in demand. And I would like to give a few quick examples of that. I'm aware that we have limited amount of time. So yes, if we could go to the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So this just gives a very quick snapshot of the different types of organizations that we work with. You'll probably see there some that you're obviously very familiar with: IFC, UNIDO, the UNDP, but as well as public sector agencies and national development agencies. You'll see there, for example, TAHA in Tanzania, the Namibian Agronomic Board in Namibia. So we sometimes will work with a combination of these. We might have a project that, for example, is funded by GIZ on behalf of, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare in India. Obviously here we're putting our focus on work that we're doing in Africa, but these are projects that we run worldwide, predominantly in developing sector country and developing countries, for example, India or Uzbekistan in Central Asia, Latin American countries, Colombia, Peru, but also in Africa, in Tanzania, Namibia, Kenya, and others. And yeah, I would like to just very quickly run through a few examples. So if we could go to the next slide. So in Kenya recently, this was a project that we finished probably about a year and a half ago. We partnered with UNIDO, which is the United Nations International Development Organization, with the goal of supporting local producer groups, so those that were already reasonably advanced towards certification, and to enhance the capacity of the farmers of these producer groups to improve the quality and productivity of their produce. And we also supported in the identification of both domestic and export markets. And as mentioned earlier, this was done through identifying local experts active in Kenya. Some of them work for government, some private sector, some independent consultants, and we provided training for them in the Global GAP Integrated Farm Assurance Standard, the quality management systems, and the crops of processing, as well as PFA. So quite significant training components, with the goal of being able to enable these experts to work with the producer groups to support their farmers in achieving certification. We also provided mentorship to selected participants to actually help them conduct audits directly with farmers. So we took them through the audit process, took them through the paperwork and that side of things, the non-sort of agronomic side of things as well, so that they were in the best place possible to be able to support the farmers to prepare for the audit. And if we could have the next slide. So in Namibia, this will go back to what my colleague Christy was mentioning with PFA. We provided training to Namibian agricultural experts who are connected to the Namibian Agronomic Board. We provided training in various topics, including IFA, but of perhaps more interest also in PFA. So we did extensive training, ensuring that the experts of NAB, of the Namibian Agronomic Board, were able to support farmers who weren't looking for international export, but were looking to be able to sell produce nationally. And we ensured that their experts were trained in PFA to support the farmers with the uptake. And what we also did, this goes back to the points earlier about sort of some of the political and institutional support that we can provide, is we helped incorporate PFA into the national legislation of Namibia to support processes to set it as a minimum standard. These are organizations that GLOBAL.A.P supports, who are experts in country, who support in developing processes and policies that help the adoption of GLOBAL.A.P standards in local countries. So they will help tailor, they will help identify what specific policies, legislative issues there may be that need to be adjusted to enable GLOBAL.A.P certification, and they make recommendation and guidance based on this. And that's all something that we helped set up in Namibia. And then one more slide. And then this is a project currently taking place. In fact, the training for this project will be happening next week in Ghana. So we're working with IPD, which is Import Promotion Desk, an organization that's headquartered here in Germany, and which supports farmers and supports farmer groups and supports international organizations with identifying European markets and retailers for which to sell their produce to. So in this project, again, the core component, as you might see, is training. So we're training agriculture experts in IFA and quality management systems. But what makes this one quite interesting for us is that these experts, in partnership with IPD, already have quite a significant number of farmers identified who are, as it says there, in the final stages of preparing for the audit. So the goal is for the experts to provide that final level of support to enable the farmers to pass the audit. And then IPD, with their connections to European markets and to European retailers, will help those farmers find direct retailers and markets that they can immediately start exporting to. So between this and with the project in Namibia, you see the difference in scale. Sometimes working with local producers for national retail, or sometimes working with those right on the cusp of certification, looking for international export. So it can vary. And I think I would close on that point. So the projects can vary significantly in scale in terms of targets, in terms of markets, in terms of political support, in terms of technical support. And this depends on the needs of the country, the needs of the farmers, and the needs of the market. So part of the process for designing these projects is trying to understand clearly what it is that farmers need and what it is that markets need, and building projects around it. So I would stop there, and I would happily take any questions now, but you can also see my contact details there, my email, my phone number, so people are welcome to drop me an email. You can steal that number, drop me a message on WhatsApp if you have any further questions, that's no problem. I think I see one question that came through was that, is there always focus in these programs on fresh or also beyond? So predominantly the focus is on fruit and vegetables, so on fresh produce. There can be focuses, and there have been focuses at time, on aquaculture. However, the predominant focus 99% of the time is on fruit and vegetables, which is usually as a result of market demand, and also obviously of GLOBAL.A.P.'s focus on standards for fruit and veg.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, and thanks to all of the speakers. A lot of information in a very short time, and a lot of abbreviations as well. The audience you don't have to worry. There is not an exam at the end of the webinar. But what we will do is continue with a short Q&A session. Before that, we'll have a short poll. Can you please launch the poll, which is about what kind of support you would need after the webinar, just to give us an idea. It's not that we can offer or promise anything, but it's more to give us and AGRAYA also and donor organizations some guidance. So what would be the support that you need? There's obviously a need for more information on options. Training and capacity building is leading. Yes, that was. There is some audit preparation support needed as well. Yeah, and also what is the right choice? Which direction should we go with our company? A valid question. Absolutely. I have a 50% rate now of the people voting. I give you 20 seconds more to reach a 60% score, maybe. The follow-up contact, yeah, all the presenters share the contact details. They are easy to be contacted, so don't hesitate and just contact the people of AGRAYA. We can close the poll now. Thank you. It's clear that the needs among you. Thanks for so far for the contribution from all the speakers, and let us continue to the questions and answer section. So if there's any more questions, burning questions from your side, please put your questions in the Q&A section, in the question section. And in the meanwhile, I was wondering, could you reveal which countries in Africa you have been working recently in the predominantly for the grain, pulses, and oilseed sector for the combined crops? Question to Ian, maybe.
So recently, at least with combined crops, we've been working in Namibia, along with the Namibian Agronomic Board. This is work that's actually been conducted this year and will run through to next year. Outside of Namibia, it has to be said, we've not, at least through partnership projects and through the capacity building initiatives, not been working with the explicit focus on combinable crops. However, given the way in which our projects are structured and given the way that farmers and experts can build on what they've learned from through IFA trainings and various things into other standards, that's not to say that other countries we worked in, that it doesn't set the ground, so to speak, and help kind of lay the foundation for potentially being able to transition into work on combinable crops into oil and rapeseed as well. But with an explicit focus, it's been mostly on Namibia so far this year.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And is the focus in the projects is always on always, it's mostly on fresh produce. However, I'm just wondering, does that mean that the companies from outside the fresh produce sector are basically excluded then in most programs? They cannot participate?
Certainly not excluded, no. Obviously, given the focus on fresh produce and on fruits and vegetables, they do not feature as directly in our project in our projects. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, as well as the training, a lot of our projects also focus on wider awareness raising or wider political support. And what that sometimes materializes as is, for example, outside of Africa for a moment, but to use an example of work being conducted in India, we, in partnership with the government, have formed a series of sort of working groups that invite retailers, that invite producers, that invite certification bodies, and invite private sector companies from all different parts of the agricultural sector. So not just fruit and vegetables, we have participation from livestock, aquaculture, and elsewhere, to share experiences and best practices with certification and with export and with farmer outreach, to just see what options there are to sort of learn lessons from one another and be able to maybe provide cross-cutting support. So even in projects where those other sectors may not be a direct focus, depending on the scale of the project and the work that we do, they are sometimes adjacent to the work and sometimes incorporated into it. But yes, the core focus usually of the training, it does still remain on fruit and veg.
Yeah, but that's so that we still need to work on that to change.
Yeah.
Question to Christy. I was wondering, in countries with a very poor national quality infrastructure, how do you get verification bodies there? What kind of organizations should we think of then in such cases?
Thank you. Yes, obviously, as I've mentioned a little bit earlier, there are countries that are now emerging, getting more, certified producers on board. Normally in the beginning, you don't have that many certification bodies active. So if you only have one or two or maybe three producers that gets into a country, they tend to look at certification bodies maybe in neighboring countries. I'm going to use this example for many years from before Kenya really got active, more and more producers. Many of the certification bodies actually flew in from South Africa or from Europe. And then a certification body was established there. And, once they enter the market, the tendency, I'm not saying that it is always like that, but the tendency is then that you do get then more and more certification bodies entering into a country. Obviously infrastructure is difficult, but, once you get more and more producers that get certified, some of these problems are being addressed, and obviously the more work there is for certification bodies, then they enter in the market. But until that point has been reached, you might need to look at certification bodies when I talk about certification in neighboring countries. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And what if we talk about the verification bodies?
Verification body doesn't have to be necessarily a big company. It could also be an individual consultant, so that is easier to set up. So normally that is when the need is there, we have a list, and I've shared it, that you can maybe share it with the rest. We have a list of verification bodies. So the automatic step would be go and have a look if there's maybe already somebody in that country or a neighboring country. Then it is like, okay, if there's a bigger demand, some of our registered trainers, which are mainly consultants, if they see, okay, there's an interest, then they tend to say, okay, but I also want to become a verification body because I see there's projects that I can get involved with. So that's normally the tendency. And once people then start to move over to IFA, the next would be certification bodies. Certification bodies can also do PFA assessments. So maybe there's already a certification body, maybe not a big market as yet, but there is maybe one or in the region. And if there's not a verification body and that certification body is interested to also do PFA, for them it's also quite an easy process because they're already approved for a higher level. They just need to do a additional course with us to make sure that their auditors are familiar with PFA. So it really depends. In those cases, people can contact us, and we can maybe give contact details of some of our registered trainers, which are also consultants in those regions. We can say contact these CBs because they also certification bodies, because obviously for them they also want to grow their businesses.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for your answer. And I believe unless there are no other questions, we can close down the webinar. Are there any more burning questions? Feel free to ask them in the chat. And otherwise, I would like to thank all the speakers, CBI, for making this happen, for Christy, you've been pivotal in running the slideshow, as I had a terrible false start this morning. Excuse me for that. I hope you liked it, and wishing you all a great day on behalf of CBI, the Netherlands, and we are going over to preparation for King's Day, which is in a few days, when our country turns orange. Have a nice day, and see you all maybe once again. Ciao.